Good afternoon, everyone. It's Wednesday, the 2nd of September, and we have three virtual events this afternoon, all different, all exciting, all geographically diverse, and we're thrilled. So the first one, we're going to be talking to Hannah Dennison, and we're going to be taking a little trip to the Scilly Islands. In fact, we have a slideshow coming up shortly of photos that I took when I visited the Scillies in May of 2019. So Hannah, it's lovely to see you.
Yeah, it's really nice to be here virtually because I love your shop and I love coming there. So this is a good consolation prize to be here. So thank you.
Well, it is, and I thank you. Now, Hannah's time, it's 1 in the afternoon in Scottsdale, and it's 9 in England. So we are probably drinking different beverages. I'm having a can of pop.
Yes, I have a very small glass of wine, please note.
I
So
know. You're
celebrating.
not the first British author where I have had to sit here and think, I wish I were drinking wine. But anyway, so Hannah is British but moved to Los Angeles to pursue screenwriting. I love this resume. She's been an obituary reporter, antique dealer, private jet flight attendant, Hollywood starring analyst. And she has written 3 different series: the Vicky Hill Mysteries, the Honeychurch Hall Mysteries, where we saw Hannah very often here at the Poison Pen, and now she's introducing a new series, the Island Sister Mysteries, with Death at High Tide, which we have over there. She also continues mystery writing workshops and is back living in the UK, where she loves dogs and seriously good chocolate,
Yeah.
which I can truly relate to. I think in times
Yeah.
like this, seriously good chocolate is like, it's like a good drug, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So tell us about the Scilly Islands, because they are British, but they are different because of the climate. They're perched off Cornwall, to the west of Cornwall, and they must be in the Gulf Stream to be so
They
subtropical.
are. Yeah, you're absolutely right. They are at the Gulf Stream, and they're about 28 miles off the southwest coast of Cornwall. So for anyone who's a pole dart fanatic, that's Cornwall, and so you're going southwest of that. And there's about 142 islands, but there are only 5 inhabited islands in the Scillies. My island I created is called Tregarrick, and it's actually doesn't exist. It's a fictional island, but it's based on Tresco, which Barbara said that she had visited, which is so beautiful there, and also Burr Island, which is on Big Breon Sea in Devon, which actually going back again to Aidan. I don't know why he's in my mind, Aidan Turner. They did the And Then There Were None PBS miniseries and filmed it on, so that's where that was filmed. So I sort of picked up that hotel and I moved it to Tresco, which is the joy of being a writer. I can make things up.
Well, you can
So
make things
yeah.
up, although Tresco, which has, and we'll be showing photos of it in a few minutes, has this amazing garden in ruined abbey grounds and so forth, and some of the most beautiful rhododendron. I was there in May, and rhododendron are simply fabulous in Britain in the spring. I mean, they are just like all the azaleas and bougainvillea and everything we can think of, but more majestic, and the colors are fabulous. I felt so lucky to be able to see them there. Have you visited the gardens yourself?
Yes, I have actually. I did teach a writing workshop on Tresco last October, and so as part of that, I was able to roam around the whole island as well. And the actual Abbey Gardens are quite interesting because I think if you might remember this too when you went round it, is that it was to do with someone who went to every country in the world and brought back plants and specimens and planted it in the Abbey Gardens. So it's an unique place, but most of the time, as you say, it's the Gulf Stream, so the actual climate is a bit like the south of France, but it also feels a bit like Hawaii at the same time. It's strange. And also, as you went to Tresco, in the northern part of Tresco, you feel like you're in the Scottish Highlands because of the heather and the castle ruins. I didn't actually know until I went to Tresco that during the English Civil War, the Royalists actually hid actually in the Isles of Scilly when they were sort of regrouping with Cromwell and all that kind of thing. So it is rich in history, the Isles of Scilly. And they had their own shipbuilding business. and it's such a tiny place. Everywhere's so small. So it's a very interesting place. Lots of shipwrecks too.
Indeed. So St. Mary's is the major town on one of the islands, and there is, in fact, a hotel that is part of the fort. So it's
Yes.
it reminded me a little bit of the hotel that you've created for your book. And we did climb up into the top and have morning coffee in the lounge and talk to a couple who had flown over from Cornwall. So it's, there's no, I'm sure there's ferries, but also there are little tiny planes that you can fly back and forth from Cornwall to, I guess the airport must be somewhere near St. Mary's.
Yeah, you don't want to. I mean, I did take the ferry, but the locals or the Solonians, they call it the Great White Stomach Pump for obvious reasons, and it's really, really awful. It's a flat bottom ferry, and it's a 2 3/4 hour ferry ride across from Cornwall, so it's quite far. And so sometimes if it's a bit foggy and you can't fly, then you're stuck on the ferry. And even I've seen even dogs being seasick up there. It's pretty challenging. So I've incorporated these kinds of things into my book to make it authentic. And I have ridden that ferry, so I do know what it's like.
Yes, you did. There's a fairly moving and not quite graphic scene about traveling on the ferry in mal de mer, as the French say. I think it's interesting, that we have the Channel Islands in the English Channel off England, which are both British and French in an interesting way. And then we have the Scillies, and then we have the Isle of Man. So Britain,
Yeah.
we tend to think of it as just one landmass, England, Scotland, Wales. But in fact, there are these satellite islands that are British, but yet very different. So maybe, Patrick, this would be a great moment if you would like to step in here and show the slideshow so people watching it can see what we're talking about. All right. All right, so a little commentary. That's the view from coming up on the harbor. You can see the islands spread out there, and of course there are loads of ships. Another view, a terrace where people can gather and drink and so forth. And this is a bench below the hotel, and that's my husband. You can see it was chilly, looking down at the shipping lanes. And another picture of it. That's quite a large ship, and I'm trying to remember. I don't think that's the ship that we were on. Is that the ferry?
I think that's a ferry. It's quite a big ship.
Yeah.
It is a really quite a big size. Although it does look a little bit too smart, because I think the Solonian is only white. It's painted in white, so that might be some other cruise sign, because it is a thoroughfare.
Right.
So you get a lot of big ships there. So I don't think that is I don't think that's the Solonian.
All right, this is us having morning coffee in the lounge in the hotel, which I thought gives just a little bit of the flavor of the hotel that you created.
Yes, it's got the the lamps and stuff. Yeah.
Just interesting greenery as we start our hike around the island. There's the fort that, and this is one of the, I don't remember if it's a gun emplacement. I think it's just a lookout as we walk around the island. More island. And they're the actual cannon emplacements on the part of the fort that guards the entrance to the harbor. This is the island where St. Mary's, the town, is located. And there's an example of some of the wonderful array of shrubs. But we're not yet in Tresco. That's coming up. This is still in St. Mary's. A pheasant.
Such pretty birds, yeah. I think that's a golden pheasant, I think.
Yep. He was wandering loosely around the gardens.
So pretty. The colors are extraordinary. It's just amazing.
All right, and so this is kind of an entrance to part of the gardens at Tresco, which you can see has architectural features and all kinds of, look at the palm trees and then the deciduous trees, and you know, it's just a remarkable mix. Just some garden scenes here. And I can never remember the name of this very strange tree.
Isn't it a strange tree? I don't know.
I could
It's
look it up.
very odd.
And then, as you see, there are lots and lots of wildflowers. I mean, this is a very English garden in that it's not formal. I mean, parts of it are, but most of it is relatively wild like that.
Mm.
Now, is that tree, is there a topiary artist who did
No, no, that's the way it grows.
Yeah,
I've run
it's
into them, strangely enough, in Peru. And they're from, I think they're from the South Pacific, and I just can't remember the name of them, but I can look it up. A close-up of the cannon where you can see, you know, like a coat of arms or some such thing. I love the baby stroller right behind it for scale.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's what's in your picture.
Right, and this is one of my favorite parts of the garden. It's a beautiful sculpture, and right behind it is water. But you know, I love the perspective. When you're standing and you look out and you see this joyous sort of dance celebration that these figures are doing. And
Yeah, Tresco.
is that it? I think. And this is when I was mentioning the rhododendron. They are just extraordinary.
When's a good time?
May. It was May.
Yeah, it's a good time to go. Oh yeah, burial thing.
I'm trying to remember whether it's a little megalith. I think it is. I think it's a bit of an ancient stone monument sort of thing.
Yeah, they have a lot of burial chambers from the Iron and Bronze Age and stuff. So I think it might be connected to that. Is that on Tresco?
Yep, we're still on Tresco.
Oh yeah. Okay, I think I know where that is actually.
Is that a cairn of some sort?
Yeah, something.
And then I like, this is when you're leaving the gardens, and I like looking back at the gate with the coat of arms and then, you know, the bell tower.
Now, is that writing up there? It's not Roman, is it?
No, it's, I'm not even sure if it's writing. Is it Celtic or is it,
I think it's just like initials of and a date. Is that right? 17.
Must be.
Probably.
17 something. Mm.
Another view
French
from outside looking at the abbey, and again some of the strange plant life. And now we're back to where we started. That's it.
Is that the first one?
Yep.
Okay. Let me
Lovely.
get out.
Makes me want to go back.
Well, I thought it made more sense if you watching it had a chance to see it, because a really terrific part of enjoying Hannah's novel Death at High Tide is to become acquainted with the Sillies, the landscape and the ecology and the old castle. So I thought seeing it would make it more real for your readers.
It was interesting because when I first did my proposal for the Scilly Isles, because I got that from my sister's friend, was the HR director on Tresco, which is a holiday island. You know, even a lot of them are all privately owned timeshares. So she was there for 8 years, and she said that people who came to work on Tresco, the seasonal workers, were either running away from something or hiding from someone. So I thought that was kind of an interesting kind of concept. So I had done this proposal about, you know, the two sisters and the hotel, but I hadn't been to Tresco at that point. And I had, you know, they bought the idea, and so I thought I really should go. And when I went, I was so off the actual atmosphere of the place. Even though I had spent lots of time on YouTube, Google Earth, watching documentaries to try and get the sense of the ambience, it was completely different when I actually stepped off the boat. And I thought, I don't know, it just felt almost there's that mystical sense of Tresco there, and something magical. The history, you can feel the history coming up through the ground almost. So I was really glad that I had a chance to go there before I turned the book in. So because it became quite different.
Well, it is quite touristy, and my hope is that it won't be overrun with mass tourism. I think that its remoteness and the fact that big ships can't really. We were on a small expedition ship, which was like 150 passengers or something. I'm hoping that it won't be spoiled in the way that Venice or Barcelona or Machu Picchu have been absolutely ruined by mass tourism and mass travel. You know, and
I think you're right. I think there's a limit to how many can actually stay on Tresco anyway, and logistically, it really is a pain to get to. I mean, and I only live in Devon, and it was just such a headache because you have to either take a plane or a train to get to Penzance or Land's End, depending, and then from there you fly or go on the ferry, and then you get to St Mary's, and then from St Mary's you then take a boat.
Right.
So it's like you have to be determined to go. So which is part of the beauty, I think.
I think that's true, that you do need to be determined to go, but at the same time, I think that's what has protected it and allowed it to give you that atmosphere you're mentioning, you know, rich in history and very quiet pace, relatively unspoiled. They have a lovely little tea room and garden, because I've never been anywhere interesting in England that didn't have a lovely little tea room. You know, every historic. I lived in England for 6 months when I was transitioning in the middle part of my life before I moved to Arizona and became a bookseller. And I toured every cathedral in England. I drove from Land's End to John O'Groats in my little car, and Cornwall is possibly the most difficult place to drive because of the hedgerows and the visibility. It's easier in Scotland, even though it's single track roads, because the visibility is enormous.
Yeah, high hedges.
But I also did my whole stately home thing because I was inspired by English heritage that it had an exhibit at the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. in, I think it was 1986, and it was called The Treasures of Great Britain. And they had brought all this wonderful stuff to show, like the silver furniture from Knoll and paintings and all kinds of wonderful stuff. And I stood there in Washington, D.C. looking at it, and I thought to myself, why am I looking at it here when I could go there? So I quit my job and I went off to England for 6 months. And what I learned in the stately home thing, because that was part of the reason I went, was that there was always food. Didn't matter where it was, there was always the tea room with amazing baked goods, or occasionally healthy things, you know, but largely baked goods. And you could have all the tea you wanted, but you had to pay for every little cup of coffee. So I had to transition, you know, to tea, because otherwise, you could run up. And the other thing I learned, Hannah, which I've always loved and remembered, is that the traffic, because you can put all of the UK in Arizona, but you can't drive it very fast because the roads are small, the congestion is horrendous. But what I learned was that when the pubs opened at 6, the big trucks and all the rest of it got off the highways and went to the pub. So the stately homes with the tea rooms would all stay open till 6 o'clock. So if you had tea and then you left at 6, you had a relatively clear driving shot wherever you were going, because most of the traffic had departed for the pubs and the roads had cleared up. So
apart from the farmers.
Well,
track.
I wasn't on those little tiny B roads. I mean, A roads were fine. Yeah. Anyway, it's just a different rhythm, and you know, it was fun to learn. So your hotel that you decided to create on an island you call Tregarrick, what was the business plan for the hotel? Since this is such a remote location, how did the hotel expect to attract enough people to make it a going concern?
That's a really good question. Actually, I've never been asked that question before. I think it's like with Tresco, a lot of the people that come back are repeat guests. You know, they've been there forever. Then you find that their grandchildren are going there. So there are quite a few places in the UK where a lot of the timeshares, specifically, are always repeat guests that have been there forever. For me, there's a Cornish place that I go to with my family every year, in the same cottage, and I've been going there for 58 years. It's a safe place. We go there every year. And even though originally it was a sort of like a hut with a corrugated iron roof, it was like a cabin, a really rough cabin. And over the years, whoever owned it, I think it's owned by Pitman, the typewriting people now, or something like that. It's now very gorgeous and expensive to live there, or to rent there rather. So I think that would be the sort of people I'm thinking would go back to Tregarrick. But half of my challenge, which is what the sisters are going to do, is to attract new people to come to the island. And that's where Evie, who wants to keep things as they are, the younger sister, and her older sister, who's the Hollywood weird, hey, that she's lived in Hollywood for a while, because I did. She wants to attract more of the VIP high profile guests. So I suppose in a way I'm trying to open up the possibilities of all different types of people who will visit Tregarrick, so I can kill them off. So I need to open it up. Because being stuck on an island, I wrote myself into a corner with that, because I had this complicated tide system and a causeway and you couldn't get off, and I realized that I need to do something a little bit more in my second book to kind of counteract that. So it made the locked room mystery very literal for me. So I had a tide table and everything.
Yes, well, you're right. I mean, that is the challenge. It's certainly going to turn into Cabot's Cove if you're not careful. And you don't want to do that. I do think that the older sister, what's her name again?
Oh, Margot.
Margot. Her idea of putting a helipad in was probably a very good one, in the sense that it could bring more people. But let's go back to the setup. So tell us about Evie. Evie is the brand new and grieving widow who was really shocked to discover that her husband may have left her impoverished.
Exactly. Yeah, she was under the impression. Well, Evie first starts, she's like in her mid-30s, and Robert, her husband, was a lot older. He was like 22 years older than her. And she was very happily married. He had a heart attack, and she thought she was comfortably off. But when the story opens, when she's having, she's meeting his business manager, and it turned out that actually he had no money at all, except for this mysterious hotel on Tregarrick Rock that sort of might belong to her, or they think it belongs to her, which is sort of setting the story up. So she's got a double whammy in a way, because she doesn't know anything about this hotel. They've been married for about 9 years, and also she's discovering that she doesn't have any money either. So it sort of makes it more, there's more at stake for her to actually go to the Sillies, prompted, pushed by her sister, who's a lot more outgoing than she is, to look and see and find out whether that was true or not. So that's how the whole thing sets up. She was a photographer before.
Yes, she was, and a good photographer, and childless and bereaved. And her husband had kind of an interesting backstory with an earlier marriage, which we don't know a lot about, but we'll find out about. But let's talk about, what really apparently happened is that her husband lent the man who owns the hotel, which has been in his family for generations, the owner of the hotel, that is, not the husband, lent him, £100,000, and this hotel was put up as security for the loan, and if the loan has not been repaid, then in theory she has either a stake or outright ownership of the hotel. So that's why she wants to go see it. And I thought that was, an interesting way to set it up. It's not entirely clear whether she has any kind of financial interest in it or not, but, why not go see?
And there are other people that obviously want to believe the hotel shouldn't be hers anyway. So I tried to sort of plant those clues as well. But you told that very, very well. I think I've forgotten a bit about the setup, because I don't know about your other authors, but because I've just turned in the second book, I actually can't remember much about the first book. I don't know why that happens. It happens every time. I don't quite understand how that works. So I have to have a little cheat sheet by me that tells me what happened in that book. So,
it's quite common for authors. By the time they come to talk to us and you, the fans, they have moved on and written a second book a follow-up book or another book or something. And often we wind up with them looking at me in a panicked way as if to say, who was that? Or what happened? Or so it's normal, and that's our job, because we read the book shortly before we have this conversation. So, details stick in our mind more than
good. I'm glad.
Might remain in yours. So what's the background of the older sister? She's an interesting character, and you're calling this the Island Sisters Mystery, not the Silly Islands or whatever.
I actually wanted to call it the Silly Sisters Mystery, but I was voted out because I thought that would work really well. So Margot, first, I must say, because my sister, I do have a sister actually, but the two sisters are both me. They're both different sides of me, because I can be very shy and retiring. And also, having had my experience in LA, which was interesting. So I have brought a lot of that into the story and into her personality. So she moved to Los Angeles with her husband, Brian, who's a Hollywood producer. And so she worked there for a number of years, and she's really only come back initially at the beginning of the book to help her sister with her grief and go and see this so-called hotel. So at the time when the book starts, she's not planning on staying there at all. And then she comes to find out that her marriage isn't quite what she thought it was. So I'm able to explore the siblings, their relationship as well, about how, when you have a sister, it's quite different than having a friend. I mean, my sister is my friend, obviously, but you're able to be a lot more, perhaps brutal might be the word, with because you're safe because it's your sister. So there's a lot more honesty, perhaps, in family dynamics sometimes, and then also a lot more aggravation too, because we all know the buttons that we pushed when we were little about childhood things and childhood games. So I've touched a bit on sibling relationships, sisters particularly. Yeah, I like Margot actually. She's my kind of it's funny, I find her easier to write than Evie for some reason. I'm not sure why.
Wow, well, that may say a lot about you now that I think about it. But
yeah.
Yes, interesting. So it can go one of two ways. Often either sisters are more honest with each other, or they're more careful with each other because of past, family dynamics or trauma. And so part of the book that they don't really talk to each other, and part of the book they do, but they tend to dodge around some things, which makes sense, because if you revealed everything to the reader right at the outset, there wouldn't be any point reading the book.
I think as well that there's that rediscovering something, and this is where my personal experience is really on the page, because I did move back to England after 25 years, living in California, then Oregon for a few years, and so I hadn't actually spent a lot of time with my sister for 25 years, even though we would talk on the phone regularly, FaceTime, all that kind of thing. It's different living half a mile away and reconnecting after so many changes in both of our lives. So I found that that's kind of interesting, that I'm able to put that into the book too, and specific as more than ever in the second book, I think, when I'm actually warming a bit more to their relationship. But there was something really kind of strange that happened when I did come back, because I've only been back about 18 months. And my sister's called Leslie, and she said, you've always wanted to be a writer, don't you? And I said, no, I wanted to be a flight attendant. I know I did. I loved everything to do with planes. And she presented me this story that she'd found in a box that my mum had given her, because my mum was moving. And I have it right here, actually. And it says first draft, and I wrote it when I think I was 12 or 13. And it's about two sisters. And now, of course, I can't find it. It's not the same one. Two sisters, one scatterbrained and one practical. So I'm not sure which one I was supposed to be. Who find a dead gamekeeper in the forest. And I plotted the whole thing out with plot points and stuff. And I honestly didn't remember writing that at all. And then in the same breath, she said, "Oh, and here's your first rejection letter that you also got." Something. I'm thinking, "Oh, great, thanks." So maybe that might be why I'd forgotten it, because it was rejected. So it was sort of like, right, I'm just going to focus on being, as my dad used to call it, a trolley dolly, and do tea, coffee, or me. So I think that it's funny to think that I actually thought about writing about two sisters all those years ago, and it was a murder as well. So it must have been percolating for so long.
That is interesting. So the two sisters managed to overcome the difficulties of travel from Cornwall
To Tregarrick.
To Tregarrick, right. And meet a couple of interesting characters just in the transit, seafaring kind of people. And then they arrive at the hotel, and they find that the owner, the one who in theory borrowed the £100,000, he's a difficult older person, and there are other inhabitants at the hotel, and there's also, strangely enough, a cat. So the cat, was that your nod to what? Because the cat is really interesting.
Mr. Tig, who is here, who I had for so many years. Here's Mr. Tig. Love that cat. He's passed away now, a long time ago. But I actually, I had this, I know people now think I'm nuts, but I'm sorry. But I had a pet psychic once who was talking to Mr. Tig, and he was telling me things about, the fact that he didn't want to be called Tiggy, because that was my original name for him. He wanted to be called Mr. Tig because it made him feel much more important. And so I got the idea that it would be fun to have a cat, and I could immortalize him on paper. And so even though the Vicar Bill, who is a sort of, he says he can speak to animals. I don't know, we'll see. But so he sort of is able to channel a little bit of Mr. Tig, but it turns out that there's a bit of a trick to that, as you know, at the end. So I like to keep that open, because I did enjoy talking to my pet psychic and learning about Mr. Tig's preferences in life. And he does have an Instagram account, which I put in the book, which is also, I created a monster there because Mr. Tig has about 2,000 followers in the book, and of course I just started it and I've got like 9 or something. I don't know.
Ah, well, there we are. So let me move the microphone a little bit closer here, because I'm not speaking up as I might. So what happens is the sisters arrive at the hotel after various travel travails, and there is, in pure Agatha Christie style, there is a group of eccentric people in the hotel. So it's almost like And Then There Were None, in the sense that you set up an isolated place with a number of people who have past secrets and agenda, and then inevitably there's a murder, right? Because that's the sort of book this is. So did you think about Agatha Christie when you were writing this? Was she a model for you and all?
Believe it or not, I didn't actually, because I think it was, unless it's by osmosis, it could be that, because I obviously love Agatha Christie's novels and stuff like that, but I don't think I actually sat down and looked at And Then There Were None and sort of put the pieces together. I don't know what made me put it on a causeway, because I did really get into trouble about it afterwards, and also my agent was, I think he had a pen and was making notes, and he was saying, but that's not possible, the timing's not right, he couldn't have been there, he has to have been somewhere else. So it was quite difficult. So I believe I am in awe of anyone that can write these kind of locked room mysteries, because it's really difficult. But yeah, I don't think I didn't deliberately think about her, but maybe, as I say, it was a subconscious thing.
Well,
so.
I think it's definitely a book that will appeal to Agatha Christie fans. So Patrick, do you have any questions or comments you'd like to forward?
Yes. Let's see. Okay. Yes. Debbie asks, "Hi Hannah, I was wondering what your writing schedule is like each day. Is it hard to balance that with other interests like making bathtub gin?"
Oh,
She didn't say
yeah.
that last bit.
Um, I actually do struggle with finding time to make bathtub gin. Actually, that was my honeychurch gin here, which is here. I don't know whether Patrick saw that, but this was in my. I know that you, with my Honeychurch books, they make this Honeychurch gin. So anyway, I only have one bottle, which is terribly sad. So I don't really want to open it yet. Um, I always write in the morning. I get up really early, not as early as I used to. So I write. I start at 7, and then I write till about 11. Then I have my dogs, walk them, do more stuff in the afternoon. But mostly my real writing time, like creative time, has to be in the morning. I can't do it in the afternoon. And then I still have my job, which was in Los Angeles, and I've been doing that virtually now, probably, or certainly since COVID. But I used to travel every 2 months to LA, and so that's at night now as well. So I have a strange kind of upside down schedule, really. So it is a challenge to juggle, but I always make writing my absolute priority, and that's the first thing I do, and don't do anything. I actually have it's called Freedom. One of my writer friends, Caroline Donahue, she suggested I use this Freedom software, and it locks all the websites and everything for a certain period of time every day. And so I use that so that I'm not tempted to jump on line early in the morning, because then I'm doomed. But it's frustrating because you can't, once it's set up, you can't sort of like halfway through think, oh, I'm not going to write anymore. I have to check the Daily Mail online. I'm embarrassed to admit it. You're sort of stuck. So that's really helped me get into that sort of habit, if that answers your question.
All right.
So pretty busy.
Yeah, and Sharon asks, she says, I love the support that your sister gave for the book. What did she think of the book? Have you had any feedback?
I don't think she's read it. I don't think. I think she feels it's safer not to read it. So, but I am actually going to the little cottage that I mentioned earlier in Cornwall in a couple of weeks' time, and because they're opening up some of the cottages in England, so I'm going to confront her with that. But there shouldn't be anything. There's nothing bad about her at all in there. It's all me.
Okay. This is an interesting question. Alicia asks, earlier you mentioned the shipwrecks in the area. Will they play a role in any future books, or have you thought about that?
Yes, I'm actually. It's a lovely question because I'm terribly excited about this. Around Scilly, there are over 800 shipwrecks that went down over the years. They're all logged. About 53 of them are all protected wrecks from some from the 1500s. And so I have this overriding. It will be like a season-long mystery if you're writing for TV about this one particular galleon called the Isadora, and that's definitely going to play a part. I mean, the second book, there is a shipwreck, but it's not the Isadora; it's a different one. So I kind of went down the rabbit hole on this, and I started reading some of the Clive Cussler of his his treasure hunting non-fiction books, which were fiction, which I think were terrific. So I'm definitely excited about doing some of that. Yeah.
Was there a wreckers community on the Scillies the way there was in Cornwall?
Oh, yes, there was actually. Yes, there was that was quite a big thing. Because there was a lot, just the same where they lure them to the rocks and things like that. I think Cornwall was more infamous, I think, than Scilly.
Right. I think what they did was when they took lights down to the shore, right, and tried to trick the
Yeah.
ships into thinking that it was a lighthouse or a safe passage, so the ship would drive on the rocks, and then they would go out and help themselves to all the cargo and possessions of people on board, often kill them. So it was a brutal trade.
That was like Daphne du Maurier's Jamaica Inn is one of my favorite books for that. That was so dark and menacing and sinister. It was good.
Yes. Anything else?
Yes. Let's see. Donis Casey, our friend, asks.
Oh, hi, Donis.
She asks, will there be any more Honeychurch books? And
Yeah.
when is the next Scilly book coming?
The next, I have Tidings of Death at Honeychurch Hall coming out in the US at the end of September. And then Diva of Death at Honeychurch Hall, which is book 7, is coming out in the UK in November, but it doesn't come out into the US until the following year. And then Danger at the Cove is the second Ciliar's mystery, and that's coming out next August, all being well, of course, with all the changes that are going on with publishing. So I've been quite busy.
So you're writing both series. You're still writing Honeychurch Hall, but now you've started in on the Island Sisters. Who's the publisher for the Honeychurch Mysteries?
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Who is the publisher now for the Honeychurch Mysteries?
Constable at Hachette. Yeah.
Okay.
So is that how you pronounce it? I think you pronounce it Hachette. I would say Hatchet, but that doesn't sound right.
Well, I call it Hachette, but
Hachette.
Well,
okay, that sounds good.
It's a double T-E ending, so it wouldn't be Hachette, which should just be E-T, but that's me being phonetically French. Right. Anything else?
Just a couple of people have noticed what an attractive cover you have for this new book, and it is really nice. Did they?
I love it.
Did you send in photographs of your cat as a model for this cat on the cover?
I did. I did send them in, actually. I sent pictures of Mr. Tig, and I also sent pictures of the Burr Island, which is, if anyone wants to Google that afterwards, it's really cool, actually. It's the Art Deco hotel that I've based Tregarrick Rock on. And then with the causeway and also the pictures, the photographs of Silly as well. I thought they did a really great job, actually. I was terribly excited, and I love the colours. And there are, obviously, it's a bird watcher's paradise there as well, which is when you saw the golden pheasant, the photograph of the golden pheasant. They're just wandering around, these birds, and they're so beautiful. So I think they've also put that on the cover because that will be another storyline I'll pursue at some point, because Evie's going to get back into her photography in the second book.
Well, this will be a wonderful opportunity to catch up on the characters from Honeychurch Hall, as well as starting this wonderful book and then reading the sequel next year. So it's been lovely to visit with you, Hannah. Thank you so much for spending some time. I will, a little toast to you. Where's your wine?
Oh, thank you. I'll toast myself.
There we are.
It's really nice to be here. Thank you. Thanks very much for everyone listening in.
And
okay.
We'll hope to see Hannah back at the Poison Pen next year or whenever travel will allow.
The moment travel is lifted, I'm on the plane.
Excellent. Well, we will be delighted to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us. Next up is Andrew Piper from Canada at 2 o'clock. And then at 4 o'clock, James R. Ben and Francine Matthews will be talking about Billy Boyle in an Agatha Christie-style country house murder. So somehow or other we're doing all Agatha Christie this month. I don't quite know why. Anyway, thanks for joining us.